Hello and welcome to the Ready to Roll podcast, episode 9. Today I am chatting with Rose Miller, otherwise known as Rosie Rolls on Instagram, and we're talking all things mindset when it comes to jiu-jitsu, how controlling your emotions, negative feelings, panic attacks, etc. while rolling, obstacles to overcome, competing, whether or not you need to compete to obtain a purple belt, and lots more. So I will let you go and get into the episode now. As always, if you love it, please share with a friend. It all helps me out so much. Welcome to the Ready to Roll podcast. I'm stoked to have you. It's awesome. Thank you very much for coming. And if you just want to, I guess, introduce yourself and what you're doing and where people can find you, I suppose.
Absolutely. So my name is Rose. Some people call me Rosie. So you can call me either. I am a brown belt out at Autos HQ here in San Diego. I started an online platform, honestly, mostly for beginners in jiu-jitsu. My handle is Rosie Rolls. And so I pop up there a lot. I'm slowly building my TikTok and my YouTube and my Patreon. So I got a bunch of other options, and I've kind of like expanded my content. It's all for beginners, right? Like my tagline is what I wish I knew at white belt, but honestly, I wish I knew everything that I know now at white belt, so it's kind of expanded from only basics to like a little bit more eclectic, some about my life, my competition journey, match reviews and everything. I just kind of share what I like and what I think is cool. So
I love that. Yeah. And I love, especially like I've been training for about 4 years, maybe just over 4 years. So I'm still a blue belt. But even at my level, I still love the idea of like things I wish I knew at white belt. Even just the mindset things, not even techniques or whatever, because like there was no room in my brain at white belt for techniques, but like understanding the nuance of jiu-jitsu,
It's so much more about the concepts for me than about the techniques. And that's really what I've come to learn. And I think we've come a long way in jiu-jitsu in recognizing how jiu-jitsu can be presented to beginners. And the details matter a lot, but you don't know why the details matter until you've experienced a position. And I feel like the more I'm able to lean into that, one, it helps my jiu-jitsu even more than a decade in this sport. I rely heavily on concepts. But two, just as a teacher, what I realized when I started teaching is I was overwhelming people with details. And they don't even know what a frame is yet, right? So like, let's back up and start there. And I think kind of leaning into more like allowing people to experience the position first, it makes everything else make a lot more sense instead of just like hearing everything in theory, if that makes sense.
100% makes sense. And I feel like I did the same thing when I first started coaching, not jiu-jitsu obviously, but strength training, say 10 years ago. And I'd be like, all right. And I'd throw like way too many cues at someone that hasn't even seen a barbell in their life.
Just like, let me see how you pick it up. Let's start there.
Exactly. And now I'm like, all right, you do it, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's almost like as an instructor, you have to collect some data first instead of like giving them all the information. Like, let's see what we're starting with. And then, because I might have a cue that one person needs and someone else doesn't, just based off of like their starting place, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like, the amount of times, I mean, for strength training, probably a little bit for jiu-jitsu, but someone will just naturally pick something up. And then you're like, oh, well, I wouldn't have had to tell you all of those cues anyway. It would have just confused you.
Yes, exactly. And I think also the more I allow myself to practice my own jiu-jitsu like that, like, let's not create a problem that's not there yet, right? So let's actually test this and try it, and let's see where I'm failing. And then like, let's go back and see why that's happening. And those are the questions we're going to ask instead of only consuming how other people do it. Let's see how I do it, the problems that I run into, and then we can kind of problem solve and fix from there. So it's kind of crazy how much teaching like really does like help my jiu-jitsu, and vice versa. So
yeah, no, definitely. Even again, still, even just at my level, if I'm helping a white belt, if they get a bit confused about a technique or something, and then I kind of learn something in the process of me helping them, remember the technique or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But when you say concepts, I love that. I reckon it's taken me 4 years to understand like push-pull and utilizing it. Like, I feel like I'm only really now starting to actually utilize it. Like, I've understood it, but I can't pull it off.
Right. You don't realize, sometimes you don't realize what you are and aren't doing.
Yeah, true.
I'm a big fan of recording yourself for that reason. And you'll find this a lot in competition, but you'll also find this just in the training room, right? Where you think you are doing something and then you see yourself on camera, you see the recording, you're like, that's not what I thought I was doing in that moment. And then you're able to start like merging the bodily sensations you felt when you thought you were doing it. So then you can start recognizing that position and say, okay, last time I felt this, I thought I was framing their hip or whatever, and I wasn't. So what do I have to do to actually do that this time? Then you can go back and check it. And I'm a huge fan of recording yourself for that reason, because it's so hard to know in that moment and have the body awareness and then like see the position from the outside,
Oh, yeah. And like, I'm also a massive advocate for filming yourself, whether it's in the gym or on the mats. And like sometimes I'll watch some of my rolls and I'm like, why was I just like doing nothing with my left hand and
or like
flailing?
I thought I looked way cooler than that.
You're like, why did it feel so hard and it looks so chill?
It's so funny though, because when I was a blue belt, I was dating someone who trained at my gym, and he was more experienced than me, more advanced than me. And he would always tell me things. Maybe he didn't do it in like the nicest way, so I got a little bit defensive because of that, but looking back, knowing what I know now and looking back on those conversations, I'm like, he absolutely had a point, because so often he would teach me something. And this is an example of me not being coachable. I think I've become very coachable because of this. But he would tell me something that I rationally knew. And so my response would be, oh yeah, I know that. Instead of, why am I not doing it then? How do I actually apply that? Because I thought I was, and it took me way longer than it should have to realize I was not being coachable. You could know things and not understand how to apply them, or where you are or aren't applying them. So it's like, man, if I could go back to be a white or blue belt now, I would approach my learning so differently, which I think is really what I'm trying to get across with my platform. I think the way jiu-jitsu has evolved, you can learn so much better and so much faster now than you could 10 years ago. So it's like, do as I say, not as I do. Be better than me. Be better than me, please, in less time. Yeah,
definitely. No, I love that. And I think as well, like when you talk about because my partner and I do jiu-jitsu together, and he's more experienced than me, and so same kind of thing, he'll offer something, he'd be like, you need to do this, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know inside that I'm not doing it, but I still know that I should be doing it, and I'm just like, just leave me alone.
Yeah, it's hard. And it's also hard, like within the relationship too,
to
separate that, because like it can be a huge benefit. So many things go into it, so many dynamics,
Oh, definitely. Having said that, he's definitely my favorite training partner. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So how did you get into BJJ? I think I read or heard somewhere, maybe I listened to a podcast, that you used to be a dancer.
I was a competitive dancer for my entire life. I started dancing when I was about 3 years old, and I continued dancing until I moved out to San Diego in 2013 or 2014. I think it was 2013 that I moved out here. And I guess I was initially like, jiu-jitsu got on my radar because of mixed martial arts. So the first martial art that I got interested in was boxing, because I had some friends who boxed. And so that was kind of like an easy entry point, I guess. Yeah. And that got me interested in mixed martial arts. And I felt very confident it's also way easier to understand what's going on the feet, right?
Yeah.
Person A got hit. That's bad. Person is winning, like it's a little bit more obvious and straightforward. And whenever the mixed martial arts matches would get taken to the ground, I just had no idea what was happening. And instead of wanting there to be like more action or to stand them up, I always just wanted to know what was happening. I think I'm a very curious person. And so when I didn't understand something, I just became even more interested in it. And around this time was like, Gina Carano, Ronda Rousey, like all these women are starting to become prominent in mixed martial arts. And so I thought that was pretty cool too, because I kind of grew up when like you didn't really see many strong women. And I had always been just like obsessed with like strength, whether it was like a superhero or an anime character or a wild animal. Like I was just always, I thought strength was so cool. And I kind of came from this dancing world where you had to be like small and delicate, graceful.
True.
And I just like love that. And also was kind of tired of it as like a girl who had been doing this her whole life and going through puberty, and like my body was changing and it didn't really fit that mold anymore. So I just became obsessed with like strength, and I started like lift weights and boxing, and I wanted to feel like that, you know? So long story longer, I moved to San Diego in 2013, and I joined a mixed martial arts gym called the Arena MMA. And I would take the boxing classes there, but then after my boxing classes, I would always stay after and watch the jiu-jitsu classes. And it absolutely terrified me because I did not understand it. That was kind of like my entry point. And then once I actually tried jiu-jitsu for real, I was absolutely hooked, and I haven't boxed since, if I'm being honest.
Oh, wow. Jiu-jitsu just stole your heart.
It did. Yeah, it was kind of at a transition point in my life. My boxing coach actually passed away. And so I kind of always thought that maybe I'd get into mixed martial arts, that maybe I just needed some time away from boxing after that, but that eventually I would bring it all together. But after I found jiu-jitsu, I just like something just clicked, and I kind of felt like it was what I had been looking for without knowing it. And I didn't feel the need to continue boxing after that. I didn't feel a desire to get into MMA. I just fully immersed myself in jiu-jitsu.
I love that. I guess like, I mean, it's obviously different from dancing, but in dancing, you use your whole body. And I suppose you do in boxing as well, but in a different way to how you use your whole body in jiu-jitsu, you know?
Yeah, I think dancing definitely helped me. It helped me have good proprioception of like where my body is in space. I do partner dancing as well. And so that's also like an energy exchange. I don't want to say it's similar to jiu-jitsu, but there's more similarities than there are differences, I think.
Yeah.
You know, the goal is different, but you have to be able to read people in a very similar way. And so I think both of those things really helped me. I think more than anything, though, I just like how jiu-jitsu isn't choreographed, and you have the problem solving aspect in it as well. I think that it's so creative in a way that boxing isn't. And so I think the way it got my brain working was just like so powerful for me, and definitely something that I needed at that time in my life. So I think it kind of took like all the things that I love about all my different interests, because I have a lot of interests all over the place, and brought them all together in one package.
I love that. That's so good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to get into some of these questions because there's a few of them, and I quite liked them. So let's just start with that one then. So, excuse me. Someone asked, what was your biggest obstacle to overcome? They've said in competition, and how did you do it? But I'd also like to know like your biggest obstacle in general for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So, oh man, I could approach this from so many different ways. My biggest obstacle in competition was, I guess there's two phases for this one. When I started competing in jiu-jitsu, I was a white belt and I wanted to jump in. Like, I didn't know anything, and I was just like ready to go. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what a game plan is. I didn't know how to score points. I did not understand jiu-jitsu at all. I came to jiu-jitsu from like a very physical place, and it took me about a full year of competing and failing to sort of kind of get it, you know? Like, I was a very slow learner, and I'm naturally a very competitive person, and I have been successful in competing in pretty much every other endeavor, and competing in jiu-jitsu was not like any other competitive experience I had. So I think like getting started in jiu-jitsu and humbling myself enough to recognize that like I actually did not know at all. Like I didn't understand how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
I would black out every time I would compete, and I would not
Really just
at all. So like the first obstacle was just like being new at something again and being bad at something, and recognizing that I like admitting to myself, like, you aren't good at this, but you could be one day if you wanted to, if you can humble yourself enough to learn. So like that was my like introduction to competing. I honestly expected myself to be good at it from the start because I had been successful in other areas of competition. And when I wasn't, it was a hard pill for me to swallow. And my ego kept pushing back, like, that was a fluke, or I'll get them, whatever. Like, I'm capable, but yes, like believe in yourself, but also recognize your limitations. And so that was my first challenge, was myself, just my ego. The second biggest challenge in jiu-jitsu, in competing specifically, and I don't know if they meant like in a single competition, but for me, I think most of my challenges in competition have been like seasons or broader themes. And like mental blocks against competing. But the second one was when I started going through all my concussions, and I felt like I had finally found my swing in competing. I had finally felt like I was expressing myself competing. And then I started experiencing all these concussions. And when I got back to competing, I felt like I had kind of lost myself again. And I was kind of back at that square one place where I didn't know who I was in jiu-jitsu anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to express. I didn't know why I wanted to compete, but I knew I wanted to. And so kind of re-identifying myself and my values and figuring out why this was something I wanted to do. And I, again, had a losing streak before I started to see any success. So I just think that process of like going through injuries, coming back, and being in a different place now than I was before.
Were you sustaining concussions during jiu-jitsu matches?
So my concussion history is like longer than how I've been training. Sorry, my concussion history is beyond just jiu-jitsu training, but it was exacerbated by jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
So I think I had some concussions when I was a kid. We didn't take them seriously. I was a tomboy. I was always like roughhousing and playing sports and getting the wind knocked out of me, and so I never took them seriously. When I was a blue belt, I had one minor concussion. And that was my first time that I had experienced what I consciously knew was a concussion. I didn't seek any help, just kind of carried on, as most people do when they first experience it. They're like, oh, well, now I'm feeling better, so I can get back to all my normal things. That's usually not the case. But then in the span of like 1 year or 1.5 years, I had multiple concussions, and I didn't understand why I was getting them. And I kind of thought it was in my head for a while, because the things that were bringing them on, I had 2 significant occasions where that they probably would have concussed anyone. But then I was having all these little traumas in between of I would break fall, and suddenly my symptoms would come on, and I didn't understand why until I learned more about concussions and how once you have one, if you don't let it heal completely, you can get concussed easier, and it takes longer and longer to heal. And so that was a very humbling experience as well. I'm definitely better from that, but I had, so yes, from jiu-jitsu, but also because I had some before jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, right. Just a little bit of a recurring thing. Yeah, okay. So I could understand. And then getting, like, you've just gotten past the ego thing, and then you've just got to go back and start again from square one. And like, I've never experienced a sport as humbling as jiu-jitsu. Never.
Yeah.
There's just no cheating it.
Yeah. Well, I think that like you have to also admit it to yourself, because I think there are a lot of people who try to cheat that aspect of it, and that's when it comes off as cockiness, maybe.
Yeah.
But if you really give because I think that's kind of what I tried to do like my first year, and I think it was more of a lack of awareness, is like I didn't realize how bad I was, which was a blessing and a curse, because it kept going. But then like I wonder how long you can carry that on. I would imagine not long before like you quit or give up, but I don't know. But I think I was definitely trying to cheat it at first. Just
for sure. I think probably being someone who values strength and stuff as well, and I mean myself too, and then you first start rolling and you realize you can't muscle your way out of these things on these people that are better at jiu-jitsu than you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. So like this thing I worked so hard to be strong is now
Yeah.
not helping me, but then it will eventually. It helps you
Yeah.
again. Once you have jujitsu and then you put it with
Yeah.
strength, becomes
Exactly.
very helpful all of a sudden.
I guess it is good as well in the early days. If you don't have much technique, if you do have strength, at least there's a bit of self-preservation going on.
And I think maybe that's why I didn't recognize it too as soon as I did. Because like I think when I was a white belt, I thought I was like, I don't want to say I thought I was the shit, but I like did not recognize, like I had to, it took me a while. I feel a little ignorant looking back.
Oh yeah, but I think that's great as well. Like I'm 100% certain you're not the only person who has had that experience at white belt, and I think me as well. Before I think I pretty quickly realized how shit I was and how hard it is and how long it's going to take, to actually really get good at it. But that's kind of refreshing to know that as well. Like, so I'm not sure if you know, but I also train handstands, and handstands are a very long learning curve, and it's a lot of small reps, a lot of repetition, like very similar to jiu-jitsu in the learning curve aspect of it. You can't cheat it. You have to do the reps, and so I think once I made those parallels, I was like, okay, chill out. Jiu-jitsu is hard.
And I think for me too, because I had done all my other hobbies from being a kid, I didn't remember what it was like to be bad at things. I didn't remember what it was like to be a beginner, because pretty much everything I did before, I mean, boxing, I guess, but boxing, I think that I wasn't as competitive in boxing as I wasn't as with jiu-jitsu. I wasn't as invested. I loved it. I dedicated a lot of time to it, but I quickly became like a strength coach for boxers, and I think because I cared about jiu-jitsu and I wanted to be good at jiu-jitsu, that it was the first thing that really like stung, that I really felt like, oh man, like this is going to take some time. But it's crazy now looking back because so much time has passed. And I remember being a white belt and looking at the brown belt women and being like, that is so cool. Like, that's going to take forever. And now forever has like passed. And now I'm like, but I'm still that white belt girl inside of me at the same time, So it's a trip. It's a trip.
It is, even just going from white to blue, honestly, like, because where I started was a brand new gym. Like they had a different gym in a different town and they moved here. So when I started, we were all white belts. And so when the first person got their blue belt, I was like, oh my God, they must be so good at jiu-jitsu. Then I got a blue belt and I was like, oh.
Yeah. Well, so that's something I actually posted on recently. I think it was about the blue belt blues. And I wish something that I had really understood when I was a blue belt is that I was still a beginner.
Yeah.
I was still a beginner. My blue belt, it's a huge accomplishment. Be proud of yourself. But I think blue belts tend to put a lot of pressure on themselves or think that they're supposed to know more than they know. But like, really, you should know how to like defend like bad positions and submissions. Like, that's 100%. Pretty much what a blue belt means. Like in judo, and what kind of made that click for me is I used to train judo as well. And I got my yellow belt in judo, which is the first colored belt that you get. And I remember not really knowing what it meant because I felt like I didn't know anything about judo. And my coach told me, no, that just means you know how to fall. And I was like, oh, I can do that.
I know, it's so funny, isn't it? The blue belt. But I think also, like, well, for me anyway, and I'm like I said, I've only been a blue belt for about 2.5 years or something, about that maybe. And it's like in that time, my mindset around jiu-jitsu and what you should know at what level has changed. And I've understood, okay, I'm still a beginner. And I don't know, I've had all of these like realizations, I suppose, on how long it's going to take, on, just because I'm a blue belt doesn't mean I'm always going to submit a white belt. They're still going to give me a hard time. If they're fast and strong and younger than me, I'm going to have to bloody work.
For sure. I mean, I had a girl ask me recently, I think she's a purple belt or a brown belt, maybe, I don't remember. But I got a DM saying, blue belt boys beat me up sometimes, and I feel like I should be able to beat them. And I'm like, listen, the more skills someone has, pair that with strength and size, it's going to be a lot harder to beat, like
especially men who've had more testosterone their whole lives and are just naturally going to be stronger than us. As much as it hurts me to say, it's true. you know,
it's way different rolling with guys than it is rolling with girls. And there's like a lot of misconceptions around that like just because you're a higher belt, you're always going to beat, lower belts. And that's just not the case. And it doesn't have to be. So
no, exactly.
There's just so much variation within belts, so you have a blue belt who started when they were like 25 or 30 and, they're in their late 20s or early 30s or whatever age, training for however many years, compared to like a kid who got their blue belt when they turned 16 after training for 10 years.
Yeah. And they're going to kick
like, I understand why people like feel that because there is also so much individual variance as well. And so we really can't hold ourselves to these objective standards of what like that means. It's completely about you and your journey. So
exactly. Yeah. It's so individual. Like that's the other thing that I learned, like me and the 20-year-old male who got a blue belt at the same time do not have comparable jiu-jitsu to one another. Like I can't compare my 41-year-old self to a 20-year-old boy, Like there's no comparison.
And you don't need to. And there, there doesn't need to be. And you can be, I was having a conversation about promotions with someone recently. And I was saying that like your belt can mean whatever it needs to mean for you. It's about your journey, your progress, your potential, not compared to what anyone else is doing,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's such an important, like lesson for people to understand,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the next question, it kind of leads on, talking about like, what your belt means to you. Someone has asked, what are your thoughts on obtaining a purple belt specifically without competing?
So, I mean, I think with that, you have to understand that if you compete, you are being tested in a way that's much different than someone who doesn't compete. Or if you don't compete, you aren't being tested in this way that someone who competes does. Someone who competes is learning not only what jiu-jitsu is and how to do jiu-jitsu, but how to do it under pressure, how to do it with someone else that is trying 100%, doesn't care about hurting them.
Yeah.
And there's a different pace. There's a different, I don't want to say pressure, but the environment is high stakes.
Yeah.
You learn how to perform and think and make decisions in a different way when you compete. So I don't think there's anything wrong with getting promoted without competing, but I do think that there is a difference between someone who has competed or competes regularly and someone who has never experienced that, because you really like, it's hard to explain until you experience it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, if we look at a black belt, for example, there's this conversation of, can someone even get a black belt if they don't compete? But I think it's important to remember the purpose of jiu-jitsu. It was developed as self-defense, right? And so I think the purpose of a jiu-jitsu black belt for most people is, am I able to defend myself against an untrained person?
Yeah.
Right. And so basic jujitsu, am I able to defend myself against an untrained person? But now a competitive black belt, now that we have this addition and this evolution of sport jujitsu, am I able to not only defend myself, but be offensive with and be successfully offensive with another highly trained person in this specific rule set, in this specific environment. And those are two very, very different things.
Yeah.
Do I think that some jiu-jitsu academies maybe don't put, like, I mean, I came from a Gracie Humaita school that was like very focused on self-defense. Yeah. And I used to think that was, I used to think that was kind of dumb. I used to be like, I don't care about this. But now as I've like matured in my jiu-jitsu, I understand it. You need to know what applies and what doesn't apply if strikes are involved, and at least a general understanding. I don't think I train for sport. I don't train for self-defense, but I do think because of the roots of jiu-jitsu, it's a good consideration to have, especially if you don't compete. I think if you compete, you learn how to make decisions. You learn to have that dog. You learn that aggression that like a competitive jiu-jitsu practitioner can probably defend themselves against pretty much anyone who doesn't train. But if you don't compete, I think putting extra time into understanding the self-defense aspect is important. So that's a long-winded answer, but
Yeah.
I don't think you have to compete to belt up, but I do think that there's other considerations.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, I personally, just my humble opinion, I think they're not even comparable. You know what I mean? Like, they're almost a different sport. Like those who are doing it to compete, to get to black belt at a competitive level, to, you know, to win all of these things, versus someone who's doing it because they enjoy it. They want some self-defense. They literally they just enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, it's still like, so you should still be recognized for your efforts. Like, it's still not easy.
Absolutely. It's still not easy. And I also think that there's this middle ground of people also, because it's not so black and white. It's not people who compete, people who don't compete. There's also people who compete for their careers and people who compete for fun, or people who compete at a master's level but take it very seriously, or people who just want to experience it, right? And I even think competing for any of those reasons exposes you to like this other, like, that just intensity that you would otherwise experience, that I do think is important. So I don't think it's so black and white between people who compete and people who don't, but like, are you actually willing to like get exposed, even if it's in training, like find that pace? And it doesn't have to be all the time, but I think there is something to that. Not everyone has to experience that, but also if like you're interested in competing, but you don't identify as a competitor, that's okay. You don't have to be a competitor to compete. You can literally just do it because you're curious.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. There just seems to be so many like of these unspoken rules in jiu-jitsu that people get so angry about online.
It's like, you don't have to follow any of those, like, I don't know, the labels, and people like to be placed in certain boxes. And it's like, do what you're curious about, you know, just because someone thinks that you have to train this specific way to compete. Like, if you've never competed before, just throw yourself out there. Like we said, gain that information first. And then if you want to continue doing it, adjust what you need to adjust to compete the way you want to. And if you don't need to change anything, then you don't need to change anything. And, you know, we don't need to take it all so seriously. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's a game. At the end of the day, it's something that we choose to do because we're interested in it, because we want to, because it hopefully adds to our life in some way. And that can mean whatever it means for you.
Yeah. No, I love that. I sometimes just think it's so funny, like some of the comments and things, especially threads and YouTube.
Yeah. Well, I read something because I recently posted a video and it was like, so like you lost your tournament and you think you suck. Well, you know, maybe you do. That's okay. Like,
ooh, sorry.
There's worse things that you can suck at than jujitsu. Like, I would much rather suck at jujitsu, but be a good human, or be a well-rounded person, or, you know, all these other things. And we put so much weight on being good at this one thing that like, it's okay if you want to work at it and be good at it. It's okay if you want to improve at it. Awesome. Love it. I do, you know, I dedicate a lot of my life to improving at it. It's also okay if you just want to do it to enjoy it, and you like, there's worse things to be bad at.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I think most people are bad at jiu-jitsu.
It's hard to be better at it.
It's hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah. So, like, kudos for doing a hard thing and keeping showing up no matter where you fall on that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Kind of leads on to the next question. This one I think is a really good question for you, because I know that you do a lot of sort of mindset stuff. Any tips for controlling emotions or negative feelings or panic attacks during rolls? She didn't specify competition. I have spoken to this girl before about it. But I can't remember. I don't think I actually was able to give her a good answer. So I would love to hear your input.
Yeah. So I think some of this might depend on the exact situation, and maybe if there's a prior trigger, right? And so I think first and foremost, especially I think if there's like a previous experience that kind of triggers the panic attack, working in very controlled environments with very trusted partners and starting very small and slowly. You know, like, we can work through one thing at a time. Let's say you panic in mount, for example, right? Well, maybe we start with side control, or maybe we start with like no resistance from mount. So you know that you're safe and you know that you can get out. You know what I mean? So like very controlled experiences. I guess it's exposure therapy, but in a very like gentle and controlled way with a very, very trusted partner, you know, in an environment that you feel comfortable in, right? Maybe that's a class, maybe that's an open mat, maybe that's a private lesson. I don't know. Right. But I think it could be something different for everyone. Can you read the beginning of that question again? Because I kind of just zoned in on that one part.
Any tips for controlling emotions, negative feelings, and panic attacks, etc. during rolls?
Yes. Okay. So then on emotions, negative thoughts and feelings, so I actually worked with Erin Hurley before PANS. She's a mindset coach.
What was her name?
Erin Hurley, Herle. And I've worked with a couple different mindset coaches before. I've done a ton of like sports psychology study on my own, but as I coach, I know it can also be super beneficial to have a coach, even if it's in an area where you are familiar with. And so I worked with her leading up to PANS, and something that we did is we had a self-talk log. And it was so extremely helpful because it's one thing to say like, oh, reframe. But when you're in that highly emotional moment, sometimes it's hard to identify, this is the moment I need to reframe.
Yeah, exactly.
And two, oftentimes our thought patterns follow like environmental patterns or behavioral patterns or like cue patterns, right? And so something that this self-talk log helped me do was identify different ways or different situations that were either like typically like the catalyst for unhelpful self-talk or unhelpful emotions. Two, it helped me identify the common stories I tell myself in those moments. And three, outside of the experience, I was able to go ahead and write out my reframes. So it's not something I had to think about in the moment on the fly when I am feeling emotional. So like this is a very jiu-jitsu specific one. It's not necessarily a negative thought or emotion, but it's something that was inhibiting me from doing my best in training. And I would feel like, I mean, there's a few things like this, but if I knew my training partner was having a hard day, maybe I knew she's on her period or she was dealing with this, that, or the other. But this is like a comp class, right? Where we all willingly show up there and put ourselves in this environment. And I was like making excuses for my training partner of why I was like trying too hard or going too hard or whatever it was. And so as soon as I started having that thought in my mind, I automatically had a reframe that kind of got me back in the moment and was able to like put me back in the situation that I was in. So I didn't feel bad, you know, I could actually do my best jujitsu, which is also best for my training partner, you know? But then there's moments like that too, with just negative self-talk, where if we already have the reframe written out, it's going to be easier for us to just kind of input that in. So the negative self-talk then becomes a cue. And then the response is
it's more automatic.
Yes. And it'll become automatic, even though at first it will take effort. You know, at first it's a conscious thing that we're doing, but the more we do it, the more automatic it becomes. And then like, whoa, this is just my new spontaneous self-talk most of the time, or it happens at a faster rate. You know, even if the unhelpful stuff never completely disappears, we'll start to have these more helpful responses faster.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that. And with the panic attacks question, I thought it was interesting what you said, because I have been claustrophobic my whole life, like very claustrophobic, and mount in particular can like, I'm usually pretty good. I can usually get hold of myself, get an escape or wait or whatever I'm doing. But there's sometimes when there's just too much going on and I feel I can't get a hold of my panic. But I remind myself, like, I have nothing to prove. And like, although I don't want to tap because I'm panicking, I can. Like that option is always there because I trust this person who's smushing my face. And I know that they're just going to be like, oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Have a breather.
Tap whenever. And I think something else, there's two other things that I just thought of too, for when it comes to panic, is one, just getting into your body. I think a lot of times when we get into panic, we get in our head and all these fears kind of infiltrate. But I think actually thinking about like, what am I actually feeling? Like not in my emotions, but what am I feeling? Okay, I feel their gi. I feel weight on my chest. What am I hearing? Maybe I hear the music. Maybe I hear their breathing. Maybe I hear my breathing, you know? And getting into your senses, I think can really help kind of ground you and bring you back down to the present. And then I think the other thing, and this is something that I've experienced competing, is sometimes, especially early on competing, I would feel like I had asthma, like my lungs were collapsing on themselves and like I couldn't breathe. And then I would start to hyperventilate even more, which then made it feel even worse, like I was going to pass out. And so I did two things that helped me with this. And again, this is just stuff that I did. So I'm not making this recommendation as like a medical practitioner or anything, but things that helped me. I would focus on my exhale because I felt like when I was like hyperventilating, it's like short inhales. Inhales. And so I would just say, okay, I'm just going to exhale for as long as I can. And sometimes it's not long. Sometimes it's very short, but at least I'm like focused on getting it out because you will automatically inhale. And what we usually need to do is like, slow down that exhale, right? And then the other thing I would do is box breathing. So counting my inhales, holding it, counting my exhales, but that's really hard to do when you're hyperventilating. So that's why I would focus on the exhale part of it until I felt like my sips of air were becoming slower and more regulated, because it's a scary feeling to feel like like your lungs are just collapsed and can't breathe in.
Especially when you got someone that's trying to rip your arm off or choke you.
Yes. Yeah.
I think as well, like understanding that like you're not the only person that's ever felt those feelings before in a match. Like it can definitely trigger some of those things. So like, you know, you're not alone.
Yes.
You're not the only person that's ever been like, oh my God, I'm a bit claustrophobic and panicked at the moment. And, you know, I can't breathe. It's like, we've all been there at some point and probably will again.
Yes.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think they're very good tips. So we might sort of wrap it up. I'm just going to have a quick look through the other questions. Okay. So do you have, I'm just going to go back to you now and talking about yourself. And so do you have anything exciting coming up that you'd like to share, or anything in the works, or anything at all? Anything?
Well, in October, I will be teaching at the Alchemize West Coast camp. So I'm excited for that. I was at their Warrior Women's Weekend last year, so I'm excited to come back. And now I'll be teaching both a jiu-jitsu seminar and I'll be teaching a performance nutrition seminar. So I'm very excited for that. I do have some other things in the works that I've been working on for far too long, but it's that kind of thing that it's like a slow build, but it will get released eventually. But I'm hoping, I really want to put on like virtual camps for people to prepare for whether it's competition, but you know, I actually want to collaborate with Aaron on this to like cover performance nutrition and also mindset, leading up for like Master Worlds, for example. So I'd say that those are the biggest things. I still do my online one-on-one coaching. You know, I'm teaching regularly here in San Diego. So if anyone's ever in San Diego, they're welcome in any of my classes. But I also post all of those onto my Patreon as well for like a virtual drop-in.
Yeah, cool. Okay, that's awesome. And I think we mentioned your handles at the start, but where can people find you across all of your things?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I am Rosie Rolls, ROSIE ROLLZ.
Cool. And I'll put a link in the thing too.
Okay, perfect. TikTok, I'm Rosie Rolls BJJ. And yeah, I think pretty much on everything else, I'm just Rosie Rolls. Yeah.
Oh, good. So good when you manage to get the same handle across all of the platforms. Yeah. Okay, cool. And I think that was all I had really. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I feel like there was so much value in there for people, especially at that white and blue level, you know, for competitors, for not. And yeah, I think that was awesome. So Thank you very much for joining me. I'm glad we were able to reschedule.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much for having me. It was great getting to talk to you.